Ben Shapiro explaining the formula of political legitimacy.
So here is the equation. L equals, and the numerator is S plus, and then it's R times A plus I. Okay, so S in this particular equation represents social solidarity. So if you have an area that has a lot of social solidarity, that's going to help the government. Because obviously social solidarity means you're all going to vote in ways that you're not going to offend your neighbor because you like your neighbor and you're not there to use the government to crack down on your neighbor. Plus, responsiveness of the authority to input, that's R, times the avoidability of the authority. So if you know that the government is both responsive to you and also if you're unable to get a response from the government, you're able to avoid the government, right? Can move out of the area. And this also contributes to the legitimacy of the government. I don't have to, if I'm in California and I don't like California, I can leave. That means that the government has a high level of legitimacy. One of the reasons being, even though I disagree with the way that California is governed, I can always take off, which means the people who are left there are consenting to being there. Plus I, which is the ability of any authority to advance the interests of its population. So, in other words, if government has the following aspects, it is going to have a lot of legitimacy at any level. This, by the way, doesn't just apply to governments. It actually applies to families as well. If there's a lot of social solidarity within the area governed by the government, if that government is responsive to input from people, if you can avoid the government, if the government doesn't rule the way you want to, you can leave. And if the government is very effective at implementing the needs and wants of its citizens, it's going to have a high level of consent. Okay, the denominator. These are the things the government can do to undermine its own authority, essentially. V is violation of fundamental or pragmatic rights by the authority or destruction of rules and roles by the authority. So the government decides it's going to wipe away civil society. It's going to wipe away your rights. It is now jacked up the levels of control it is using against you. It undermines the legitimacy of the government. R, right? This is R prime. It's the regulatory strictness of the authority. So the authority passes very, very strong regulations to move against you. This undermines the legitimacy of the government unless you've consented at a very high level to that government. And finally, the aggressiveness of the enforcement by the authority.
Jesus Christ. I don't know what it is about these fucking right-wing thinkers that always seems to move them almost like a teleological necessity towards that Charlie Day meme. Like they start off far away from the Charlie Day meme and then just gradually as fucking time goes on, they get there. They're like, I gotta have it in an equation some way because if I put a bunch of equations on a fucking wall, that means I'm being way more reasonable and logical than anybody else. God damn it.
Yeah.
I got questions though. Because not everybody can just get up and move away, not because of the government, but just because of like economic reasons. So, like, you know, how is that free? I don't know.
It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have anything to do with the legitimacy of the of the government, according to Ben.
It's also, you know, it's also confusing because it's like, I don't know. I mean, I think about like my. You know, and it's funny because like we joke about it because like the Curtis Yarvin we're about to talk about, there was one of his fans getting mad at my Jacobin article about him referred to me as a New York Khazar Marxist, which is a really weird deep cut way of saying Jew, you know.
It's also like just right on the tip of the tongue, right? You can tell that they're just aching to say it, but they can't quite. It's almost a little disappointing in some ways.
Yeah, it's like once you're going there, why not just save yourself some characters and say it? But anyway, you know, it's part Jewish, whatever. But like I have a but in that part, right? I think about like my great grandpa who was born in what's now Ukraine, and nobody was stopping him from leaving, to put it mildly, right? Like the Russian government, you know, the Tsarist government in Russia was eager, you know, to any, you know, it's like, oh, you know, these like, you know, Jewish people, the Pale settlement, that they want to leave, get out, please, right? Like, get the fuck out, go for it, right? Like that seems to be the attitude, as far as I can tell, that they were enthusiastically in favor. So it's like, yeah, you clearly had the ability to leave, but I don't know that really gives the Tsar a lot of extra legitimacy in that scenario.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, a lot of those variables are ridiculous because the open question is how the hell can you quantify something like solidarity or accountability, right? Or for that matter, basic rights. I mean, so much turns about what you consider to be the basic rights. And there's widespread disagreement around that, just like there's widespread disagreement about what would inculcate solidaristic sentiments amongst us. I mean, I would argue that the United States would be a more solidaristic place if we were to implement something like a universal healthcare system here. That would demonstrate an awful lot of solidarity between people when you're able to take your kid to a hospital and you wouldn't get them rejected because they'd said, sorry, you don't have insurance, right? But I don't imagine that Ben is aching for that kind of solidarity and that kind of legitimacy, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the question of why putting this into a mathematical equation, I understand on some level it's a metaphor, but the question is what is it clarifying versus confusing? I mean, I think I saw some of the replies were saying if you actually plug numbers into this, it would just like some of them would just be zero, right? So it would just become zero. So there's no math.
If it's not zeros and ones, like how do you decide?
Yeah. And why is it? And also, why is it division it could just be subtraction, right? Like I'm just saying, like
when you explain it, it really seems like it could just be subtraction. Maybe I'm missing something about some of the subtlety.
Yeah, I don't understand why you would do that.
Yeah, those just are math surgeons, right? We're not math surgeons, so we're not quite sure if subtraction is the right way to go.
I mean, a normal textbook could just say, here are some of the factors that go into a government's legitimacy. Some up, some down. I don't know the efficacy of putting it in this.
I think maybe we're missing the larger project at stake here. You know, he's heard that there's something called scientific socialism. And, you know, this is his version of scientific conservatism. You know, it's a step-by-step, construction of a new ideology.
Yeah, he finally decided to crack open Capital Volume 1. Went through like the first couple pages and he's like, oh, he's got those weird C prime numbers. Well, I can fucking do numbers of my own, bitch.
I like that. Yeah, there's a prime. It's a prime just because the two words start with. Well, I guess that's always why something is prime. But I just had to laugh when he's like, our prime. Like,
if we start hearing about linen coats, I'm just gonna go crazy.
Yeah. How many yards of linen is how many years of corn? Exchange value ratios from chapter 1. But like, look, I mean, not to belabor the point, but yards of linen and ears of corn literally are quantifiable, right?
Yes.
Like you can have like 10 yards of linen or 9 yards of linen. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yards of freedom. It's the next step.
Yeah, exactly. And also like I don't understand why it's divided, right? Why it's a fraction, not just minus, but whatever. Okay. Why says how strong the regulations are, right? It's like so anything like any kind of strong regulation is just going to make you less legitimate. I mean, this is like, we're trying to be precise here. It's a formula. So it's like, I mean, it's not just like, well, in certain cases this might, but it's like, no, you're saying that like, as a general rule, you're presenting it as like a law-like generalization, like a law of physics or something. Like, as a universal rule, stronger regulations make government less legitimate. Really?
Oh, but I do like Jake's idea though that I'll plug in this formula and I'll just keep coming out with zero, and I'll get really frustrated and just start banging the computer. And at the end, just like sit there and be like, I guess no government's legitimate, so I'm going to become an anarchist, and that's the end of Ben Shapiro, right? Just meanders off into the desert somewhere, live in a commune.
He poofs into a cloud of logic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I got to say, I mean, it seems to me that it's like a government that like, lets people, die of cancer because it doesn't stop other people from like dumping pollutants into the river would actually, I mean, I would naively think have less legitimacy because of that.
Yeah, and Ben's solution to crime, particularly in racialized neighborhoods, is just to send more police into them. As you put it in Joe Rogan, right? It's an unpopular view, but it's the clearly the most common sense view. And I would think that sending more police officers into an area where people are generally hostile to the police for very good reason might not necessarily be the best idea. But it probably also counts as regulating them a little bit more heavily.
Yeah, exactly. According to his formula, it makes it less legitimate.
Yeah. You see, you and I just lack the kind of reasoning capabilities to understand that that's a different kind of regulation than the one that Ben is talking about. And solidaristic regulation.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.